Hello, I'm Olly and this is CriminOlly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, Christmas bombs, Nazi spies and a couple of mammoths. It's my weekly wrap-up. So we are in one of my favourite times of the year, the time between Christmas and New Year, where I basically have nothing to do apart from laze around and read and eat leftovers from Christmas. So a very happy time of year for me. I hope you all enjoy it too. So I've got 4 books to talk to you about today, which I finished. But before I do that, just a quick reminder that you have just a few more days to get your submissions in for the Trash Tales anthology that I'm publishing with Alex from the channel, Alex Unabridged. So we'll be publishing it in August to coincide with Gulb August 2025. But submissions for stories for it close at the end of this year. So close at midnight on the 31st of December. So yeah, you've just got a few more days to either start a story from scratch and write it, or to put the finishing touches to stories you may already have started. And do remember that Sean Hudson, one of my favourite trashy horror novelists, claims to have written some of his novels in a weekend. So it is possible for you to write a short story that is trashy and 5,000 words or less in the few days that you've got left in the year. So looking forward to seeing more submissions. I'll leave a link in the description to the video to the submission guidelines. So it's been a good reading week for me this week. I've got 4 books for you to talk about. So the first thing I finished was The Mammoth that I've been reading all month, which is the Diaries and Notebooks of Patricia Highsmith. So Patricia Highsmith, a fantastic crime writer whose work I've been reading over the last couple of years, read all of her novels now. She was just brilliant, and this was a fantastic book. So I've spoken about this in a couple of weekly wrap-ups already because I started it on the 1st of December. My original plan was to read 30 odd pages a day in order to get through it in the month, but I ended up just reading like the final couple of 100 pages, just pretty much back to back. I couldn't put it down. I was really gripped by this. It was a fascinating experience to read somebody else's innermost thoughts, and the fact that Highsmith was such a great writer made it even more interesting. But there's something like weird almost and slightly intrusive feeling, but also very compulsive about reading someone else's diaries. It's the kind of thing it's almost a joke, isn't it, to read someone else's diaries, but that's what you are doing reading a book like this. I'm not sure that Highsmith ever expected these to be published, so it does. I read it with mixed feelings, but it was a really fascinating experience and a very moving experience as well, particularly towards the end of the book when A, the entries become much less frequent, but B, she is obviously starting to struggle with her health and things like that. And the most moving part of all is the fact that the diaries just stop. And then you get the kind of afterword from the editor saying that basically she had died and that's why they stopped. So a really fascinating book. If you are a fan of Patricia Highsmith, I definitely recommend it. It's huge, it's 1,000 pages, but I thought it was well worth the effort. Definitely one of the best books that I read this year. And the only reason it didn't make one of my top 10s was the fact that Edith's Diary by Highsmith did make one of the top 10s, and I had only one book by each author rule. So yeah, absolutely wonderful stuff. The second thing I finished this week then was another mammoth, and that was The Thorn Birds by Colleen McCollough. So not quite as huge as the Patricia Highsmith book. Thorn Birds is only about 700 pages. And boy, by the end, did it feel like it was 700 pages. I mean, it's very engaging and interesting to read, but I did start to resent it a little bit towards the end. So it's set in Australia from around the time of the First World War through to kind of the 1960s, and it focuses on this family who have basically a sheep farm. So it's one of those kind of multi-decade generational family saga type books, but the core of it really is the relationship between the family, and in particular one of the daughters of the family and a Catholic priest, and that relationship ends up being a romantic relationship, which, given that they meet at the start of the book when the daughter is 10 and the priest is 26, did feel quite uncomfortable. I thought by the end of the book, Colleen McCollough had managed to make it feel less uncomfortable. And I should add that there is no hint of any kind of physical relationship between them until the daughter is well into adulthood. But yeah, it did feel a little bit uncomfortable, especially as he was a Catholic priest. But yeah, an interesting book. The Australian setting I thought was really well used, really, really interesting. And there's lots of, kind of detail about life in Australia, about sheep farming and things like that, which was fascinating. And you do get some interesting characters. There's some really interesting kind of events that happen in the book. But overall, I guess it's just not really my kind of book. So to read a 700-page book that was not really my kind of book did feel like a bit of a struggle. I know there are many people out there, because I've had many people say it in the comments, who absolutely love this book. But I thought it was fine. I finished it, which shows that I was enjoying it at least a bit. But I didn't love it. Next thing I read after that, and you will have seen this if you watch my my sprints on YouTube on Boxing Day, was Victims by Jack Pearl. So this was very kindly sent to me by Eerie, one of my viewers, as a Christmas gift. This was really interesting and fun. I love books like this that have just completely vanished from the public consciousness. I think that this was probably only published in a few editions. It claims on the cover that it's going to get made into a movie, but that movie never materialised, so the film never got made. But it was a fun, interesting read. Very much of its time. So published, I think, in 1972. And it definitely felt like a book from the early 70s. So set in New York. And it's about a black militant group who are like planting bombs basically around the city, particularly on holidays. And this book takes place at Christmas. So they've wrapped up a bomb in Christmas wrapping paper and hidden it in Macy's, the department store. And the bomb basically goes missing. So nobody knows where it is. And it's kind of a race against time with the leader of the militant group and a cop who's on the bomb disposal squad trying to find this trying to find this bomb. So it ends up being kind of a, one of those kind of mismatched buddy style movies where the cop and the militant, join forces to try and find and defuse the bomb. It was interesting. It was an interesting take on racial politics in America in the early 70s. It definitely at times felt quite dated, but overall I didn't think it did a terrible job of talking about that. You do feel some sympathy for the causes that the militant group are fighting for, even if you don't, agree with their methods. So it was interesting. It was tense. It had a great subplot featuring a character who was like a Father Christmas, a Santa Claus at Macy's. So overall, I really, really enjoyed it. It was a quick, gripping read. I almost finished it in the reading sprints that I did, which lasted for 2 hours. I actually had about 4 or 5 pages left at the end of that, so finished it just after. But yeah, a very quick read, but really tense and enjoyable, and an interesting kind of snapshot into the past, into what New York was like in the early 70s. So yeah, a fun read. And then I've also just finished The Eye of the Needle by Ken Follett. So this is a World War II thriller, originally published in 1978. So this was my 1978 pick for the My Novel Life Challenge, where I read a novel from every year I've been alive in chronological order. My original pick for 1978 was The Long Walk by Richard Bachman / Stephen King, until I realised that actually that book was published in 1979, not in 1978. I think somebody pointed it out to me in the comments. So I ended up reading that earlier in the month because I wanted to read it anyway. But yeah, I've now read the Ken Follett book, which was really interesting and fun. I had read this before, but like ages and ages ago, I think probably 25 or 30 years ago. I really enjoyed it. It's a very, to say that it's competent almost feels like it's damning it with faint praise, but just a well-crafted thriller set in the UK during the Second World War, and about MI5 trying to hunt down this German spy. And in particular, it revolves around the D-Day landings, and this spy understands the truth. So if you don't know the history of the D-Day landings, basically the Allies managed to convince the Nazis that the attack was going to take place in a different part of France. And this German spy has discovered the truth and is trying to get the message back to the fatherland. So it's about like MI5 and various other characters trying to stop this spy. So really gripping, really, Well, it felt like a convincing portrayal of wartime Britain as well. Some really good characters. There's a female character in particular who's excellent. Really, really enjoyable to read. And you do come to have a little bit of sympathy for the spy as well, who has been in the UK since before the start of the war, living this double life. You do get an interesting insight into kind of his thoughts and things like that. So overall, a really enjoyable thriller. I really had a good time with it. I'm now reading this, which I rather foolishly put down underneath my phone, which I'm using to record the audio for this. So apologies if there was a bit of a funny noise there. So now reading this book, Hank and Muddy by Stephen Mertz. So I said I was going to read this in the in my TBR for December. And a viewer pointed out to me that Stephen Mertz sadly very recently passed away. So Stephen sent me this and one of his other books a little while ago, which I've read, Sherlock Holmes, Zombies Over Yonder, which was Zombies Over London, I think it was called, which was a really fun kind of Sherlock Holmes pastiche novel. Stephen had a very, very long career writing kind of men's adventure books and westerns and things like that. So I read recently a Mac Bolan short story by him, which was fantastically good. So I've just started this. This so far seems like it's going to be really fun. So it's kind of a crime thriller, but with Muddy Waters and Hank Williams as the central character. So it feels like it's going to be a bit like one of the Hap and Leonard books by Joel Lansdale. So that kind of style of thriller. So really, really looking forward to reading it. I'm very sad that Stephen is no longer with us. He was a very, very talented writer of kind of enjoyable pulpy thrillers. So very much looking forward to reading the rest of this before the end of the month. So in terms of channel stuff then, in the last week you've had my kind of wrap up for the year. So my 13 least enjoyed books that I read this year, or at least most disappointing books, and then top 10. So my top 10 crime books of the year, my top 10 horror books that I read this year, and my top 10 other books I read this year. So non-crime, non-horror. So hopefully people have enjoyed seeing my picks for the year. In the week ahead then, you're going to get a book haul video. So despite being on the Read What You Own challenge, I have received a few books over the Christmas period and before Christmas as well. So I've got a book haul video going through those. I will be doing my TBR for January. I'm doing a video talking about why I'm not that worried about either TikTok or AI and, the influence of those forces, I guess, on books and on reading. Both of those things are things that people seem to be quite concerned about at the moment. I'm not that concerned, and I explain why that is in a video which will be going up probably tomorrow on Sunday. And then I've also going to be doing a review of one of my top 10 crime books of 2024, May the Wolf Die by Elizabeth Hyder. So that'll be going up on Thursday. So there you have my reads for this week. I've had a very nice relaxing week reading. Hopefully you have too. Hopefully you've got a bit of time off work. But do let me know in the comments what you've been reading. And as always, thanks very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff. And I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.